Hey everyone, welcome to Power on the Move, the series where we catch up with the people taking clean power on the road and proving you don't always need gas or noise to get the job done. I'm Pascal Gelrich. Joining me today is Ryan Flanagan. He's a Newfoundland and Labrador-based production sustainability advisor. He recently helped a major streaming platform's production cut its carbon footprint without slowing down the crew. Ryan, it's good to have you here. For people who aren't familiar, what exactly does a production sustainability advisor do on a film set?
Thanks so much for having me, Pascal. So, what a production sustainability advisor does on set is we're in charge of helping reduce or eliminate any CO2 emissions, any potential CO2 emissions. So, that could be from a diesel generator, that could be from a gas powered vehicle, or anything in between. We do this reduction or elimination by tracking everything that happens. So, if the electric department is running a diesel generator for 10 hours one day, I'm writing that down. And I'm writing down what electrical load and output it was running at. So if we can track it all and have conversations with these departments, then we can find creative ways to eliminate those fossil fuels or reduce them or swap them out for some other green tech or an alternative power source.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds like such a unique gig. It's obviously relatively new to the industry, but so important. You're one part data tracker, one part environmental champion, and a constant on-set problem solver whenever sustainability is confronted by chaos. So take me on this production. You're monitoring every generator hour and trying to convince a crew that's done things the same way for probably 20 years to swap diesel for batteries. How did that go down?
Well, that's a great point that you started with there. They've all been doing this for maybe 20 years, and they're the experts way beyond me. So the way it went and the way I like to do it is as long as I can get these batteries or these power alternatives, these green power, whatever it may be, if I could just get it in their hands so they could play with it, that was a win for me. So at the beginning of production, they were maybe a little bit resistant to using these batteries, maybe using some of the things that I was asking them to use to reduce the CO2 emissions. But as long as I could get them access to them, where maybe if they had a little bit of downtime, they could fiddle with the batteries there, then I knew that if the batteries had pros, if there were advantages to using the batteries, since they're the experts, I know that they're going to find those advantages and I know that they're going to be interested in using the batteries. So my first approach was just to get their hands on these things so that they can learn how they work and learn what they're good at and then start from there.
That sounds like a great way to do it. We often call it touch, trial, and test, like in a low risk environment, right? Just to get comfortable with the gear and then take it from there. And then it feels like, they're empowered to use it and they find how it fits and they find the use cases, which is always amazing because it's really unleashed by creativity and what they can do with it as well, right? So there's a lot to unpack there. You mentioned the smaller Instagrids really earn their keep, especially on those boat shoots. Give us a picture. Thinking like 16 hours on a tiny boat, no wall plugs, nowhere to escape the noise. What difference did clean, silent power make for the crew?
So clean power on boat days was huge. We're filming in Newfoundland, so this is an island. There's lots of boats. If you're filming here, it's more likely than not that you're going to be, on a boat filming something. It's the way Newfoundland is. And picture this: if you're the electric department and you're out at sea, far away from access to anything, and you've got your whole setup on the boat, and all of a sudden one of the departments asks for just a little bit of electricity, say it's props or someone, they're like, oh, we just need to power this one small thing. You can't attach that to the main line or anything. It doesn't exist. You are on the ocean, far away. So just throw an Instagrid at them or something like that. It's the perfect solution to a problem like that. And not to mention, everyone on these boats, it's crowded. Sometimes it's hot. All the fumes from the boat are already there. So any fumes from generators, if they were to be on this boat, would be right in your face. You'd be breathing it right in. And that would definitely add to the seasickness, which is already a problem for everyone who has to work in these cramped spaces on these boats. So it's just an amazing thing to have a little battery that can it's like it can magically power the things you need to be powered. It just sits there It doesn't make it harder to breathe when it's already hard enough to breathe, and they're silent. So you can film in these confined spaces, and the actors and the sound department don't have to worry about anything like that. It's a really great solution for working out on boat.
That's amazing. You painted a really good picture of that scene, especially surrounded by water and obviously waves and diesel fumes. Good recipe for seasickness. And then quiet starts to sound like a luxury, right? Um, okay, and then there's the Voltstack 30K, the big one. I heard it wasn't exactly love at first sight with the crew, but when it was used, it pulled its weight. What stood out to you about how it actually performed once you got it in the mix?
So yeah, you're right. The Voltstack, which is gigantic compared to those Instagrids, it is a trailer. It has to be towed by a truck. That one was a longer transition for the electric department to fall in love with it, let's say. But once they did, they were definitely able to find many situations where it was advantageous to have it. But the main hiccup there at the beginning was it takes an extra truck to drive it. It takes someone paying another person to bring it from location to location. So we were moving around to a million different towns. So it became a challenge in that way. However, it came in clutch in other times. Say, for example, it's actually kind of similar to when we were working on the boats. We were filming in a cave at one point, and so you can't drive a diesel generator into that cave. It's a big safety issue. It's a health hazard. You can't be breathing that in a confined space like that. And this was a small cave, and there's a lot of people working inside there. So we had the Voltstack battery, and we just put it near the mouth of the cave, near the entrance to the cave, wired some lines in there and powered everything we needed to do. And it was again silent because there's a lot of echoes in a cave. It's very easy to ruin the sound in a cave. And that breathability was so important because it's definitely not an option to use generators when you're working inside of a cave.
That's amazing. It's interesting. Probably 10 years ago when Voltstacks were first used out in Vancouver, there's a gaffer named Todd Lapp who used it on a film called Man in the High Castle. Also, a lot of confined space shoots, and he specifically talks about what do you do in a cave for power, right? So that was one of the original use cases of the Voltstack. So it's nice to see that almost come full circle in Newfoundland as well. That's great. Yeah, so that's something we run into all the time. The tech works; it's just the mindset that needed a charge. So sort of that period of adjusting for the crews, finding the right use case. It's not always going to power lights, but it might power tech land or power other areas where it's useful, or in this case, a confined space. Um, so you're also bouncing between some pretty remote outport locations, big moves, short shoots, changing plans. How did that constant motion test your sustainability plans? Because I know that was one of the challenges that you had identified at one point.
So you're right. We did go to a lot of different small towns here in Newfoundland. We call them outport communities because they are, out on the coast, working, a lot of like fishing villages, you might call them in another part of the world. And we were moving back and forth and traveling a lot. We might visit one small town for 3 days, then leave and go to another one, and then go back to that same town later down the line in the production. So there was a lot of moving around. And like we spoke about earlier, that Voltstack 30K, it is a trailer. It requires a truck. It requires a person to drive that. So when your whole transport crew is tired and working extremely long hours, it's difficult to justify moving from one place to the next. So I found that sometimes the decision would be made to just leave the Voltstack somewhere and not drive it so that when we came back to that place, we could use it again there. So it was always a balance of deciding when it was worth it to move it from place to place, because you also have to bring into consideration if you're driving that battery with a gas powered vehicle, you're burning emissions just to save emissions later. And it all becomes a bit of a gymnastics and a song and dance on when to choose to bring the Voltstack somewhere and when to choose to not bring the Voltstack somewhere. But I found through experience working on this production that the Voltstack excels at powering Techland or equipment trucks just like that. So whenever we were in a setup where there was a full-on Techland with all of our equipment trucks in a line or in a parking lot put together, the Voltstack was fantastic at powering those. It really excelled at that load and that electrical level to just do the entire, you know, charging some batteries for the camera truck and powering whatever each different department's semi-truck needed to have on the go. So that is where we found success with the Voltstack.
Well, it's great to hear. Just having that quieter environment as well, when there's a lot of people around, occupational health and safety and those things are something to think about as well. So yeah, like you said, and even in that chaos, you're still finding wins, keeping lights on, keeping the air clean, and proving that green doesn't mean fragile, right? You find a use case that works. Now, productions like this, they bring a lot of attention to the East Coast. Um, from your perspective, does showing that we can run large scale sets cleanly help local crews and suppliers stand out when big out of province or international shows come calling?
Yes, it definitely does. Newfoundland is booming right now for TV and film. There's more work to do here than ever before, and it seems like every year people are still saying that because every year beats the last year. So right now there's so much going on, and it seems like every production is beginning at least to introduce their own sustainability efforts, whether it's a sustainability coordinator or just some targets and some goals. And what really stands out is that we're drawing in these bigger production companies, these big streaming companies and organizations like that, and they all have their goals and their standards and their pledges. And so it's almost required to have sustainability and to have access to these alternate fuel sources, these alternate power sources like batteries, because without them, the big companies aren't probably interested in coming here. They need to meet their marks, they need to hit their targets, they have their goals, and without sustainability, they aren't able to reach those goals.
So that's awesome. Cleaner, quieter, now more competitive. I like that equation. So what's next for you, Ryan? Are you diving deeper into sustainability, back to camera work, or do you still juggle both worlds?
I don't necessarily juggle both worlds. I really love doing sustainability with this most recent production that I was on. And like I mentioned earlier, Newfoundland is really growing right now. It is Newfoundland, so it's a smaller province in Canada, but by our standards, film and TV is going crazy at the moment. So I'm putting my digging my feet down into sustainability, I think, and I'm excited to see what comes around next summer, what TV shows are on the go, what movies may come here, and see what the future of film in Newfoundland brings me.
Amazing. Super exciting to have champions like you in the mix because it's really shifting a whole industry to a more sustainable footing. And, people that speak passionately about it and, have experienced it and also contribute to it, that really makes a big difference in the long run because you're bringing other people on board and that's how change really happens. Um, so Ryan, thanks so much for joining me today and sharing your story and insights.
Thanks so much for having me.
For those of you who want to learn more about clean, silent, and portable power, visit starpoweratlantic.ca. I'm Pascal Gelrich, and this has been Power on the Move. Until next time, keep it clean, keep it moving.